So there's no doubt that nowadays the road to becoming a pilot is long, difficult and definitely expensive. 5 years ago I was fixing bicycles. Now I fly a 737-800 engine. Hey guys, and welcome. So you want to be a pilot? Stay tuned, find out how. So first thing I would recommend to any aspiring airline pilot is to go and take a trial lesson. These trial lessons are available in every country, from flight schools, from the big ones to the small ones. And all they involve is you paying essentially for a 1 hour lesson, maybe a 45-minute session. This will give you a really good idea of your suitability towards the possibility of a flying career. It also gives you a good chance to ask the instructor any questions you may have specific to the country where you're going to be studying, and the options that the school give you, or the routes you can take to become a commercial pilot. I will cover the routes in this video of how to become a commercial airline pilot. However, there is one big step you need to take before deciding on what route to go down: the medical. There are two types of aviation medical certifications. We have a Class 1 and a Class 2. I will focus on the Class 1, as if you're watching this, I'm assuming you want to become a commercial pilot, which is what you need. Class 2 is for private pilots only. So the initial Class 1 examination is relatively intense. It involves blood test, hearing test, X-rays, ECG, an eye exam, and various other tests, which I can't remember the names of right now. It can take a fair few hours to do, and there will be various doctors or clinics that will be authorized by the aviation authority in your country to do it close to where you live. Once you get your Class 1 medical, it needs to be renewed every year. Each year there are slightly different tests that you do. Some you only do every 2 years, some you have to do every year. It needs to be current for you to fly. And nowadays it can be renewed 45 days before the expiration date, and you keep the same validity on the medical. Now, despite popular beliefs, pilots can wear glasses. The exact requirements can be found in JAR FCL, subtopic something. So I would strongly recommend any aspiring or future wannabe pilots to first of all go and get your medical. There is no point investing a lot of money in training only to find out after you've spent all that money that you can't get your Class 1 for whatever reason. So you've taken a trial lesson and you've got your Class 1 and you're deciding you're going to go for it. Well, there's two routes you can take. You can either do a modular route or an integrated route. I will explain both. Both have pros and cons. I could go on endlessly about pros and cons on both. It essentially comes down to what you need, what your needs are. I personally did a modular route because I needed to keep working to fund it at the same time, so modular was the only option available for me. I didn't have the money to front for an integrated course. Integrated courses take a lot less time, you come out a lot quicker, and a lot of the time, dare I say, it may be slightly easier to get a job afterwards depending on the school you go to, but I definitely don't want to put you off a modular route if you want to do it that way. I did it that way, it worked out fine for me. And at the end of the day, no matter which route you choose, or which school for that matter you choose, you will end up with the same license everybody else has. So don't be put off by thinking I need to go to an expensive school or a cheap school won't be good. You will end up at the end of the day with the same license everybody else has. It's up to you what you do. So whether you do integrated or modular, the first step I would probably recommend is doing your PPL. It's around 45 hours flying, and it will give you a private pilot license. 45 hours is the minimum required. Some guys might take more. To break down the 45 hours, you need to have roughly 5 hours solo circuits, 5 hours cross-country, a qualifying cross-country flight of at least 150 nautical miles, and 5 hours simulated instrument time. There's a few other requirements. It will vary slightly from country to country and from school to school even, but the schools may adapt their courses as long as they meet the aviation requirements, then that's fine. How long does your PPL take? It depends where you do it. If you're doing it in the UK, it may take slightly longer because 45 hours of visual flight is hard to get when the weather's bad. If you do it in Spain like I did, it may go pretty fast. Again, it does depend on the school. I did it a modular route, took a lot longer. Overall, my modular route took around 4 years to go from 0 to my CPL. Why I think PPL is important, because this is where you pick up your core skills, your basic hand flying skills. There is a certain amount of theory work required to get in your PPL, just like your ATPL, which I have a few videos on. There's a PPL. It's basically a more basic version of the ATPL exam and slightly less subjects. In most aviation exams, the pass mark is 75%. That goes for PPL, ATPL, etc. You should be aiming though for a lot higher than that, especially on your ATPL. A lot of airlines will ask you for the results that you're getting and will want to see those results at least above 80%. So you also need to obtain a night rating. Now, a night rating is 5 hours flying at night, or at least after sunset. It's done at a controlled airport with runway lights, and it's very good fun. It must include 5 takeoff, 5 landings minimum at night, and some cross-country navigation for the rest of it. Those were probably my funnest hours to fly. Quite scary flying VFR at night, but very good fun. So after you've done your PPL, you can now rent aircraft and fly yourself to build up hours, which is what I did. So I built up my hours by renting aircraft in Madrid. During that time, while I was building up my hours, if you do a modular route, it's around 200 that you need minimum to gain your CPL. So while I was doing my hour building, I was also doing my ATPL theory. ATPL theory is probably one of the hardest and longest sections of becoming a pilot. You're going to need real determination here. In order to start your commercial training, you are expected to have a very good knowledge of the commercial subjects from ATPL. ATPL is Airline Transport Pilot License. There are 14 subjects in ATPL, and these exams will really test you. You'll find most of the content is not difficult to learn, it's just the sheer amount of content that you need to learn in a short period of time. I did my ATPL in around 13 months to pass all exams, and it was a lot of information in a very short amount of time to take on board. Again, the pass mark 75%, but aim higher. There are some schools that offer distance learning ATPL, and there are some schools that will offer you in-house lessons with some instructors. In my experience, the school has got to be rather good for the instructors to be good. These in-house courses can take anywhere between 4 months to 8 months. It really depends on the school. But please go check out the school, see what kind of vibe you get to know some of the instructors before you make a decision on where to part with your hard-earned cash. And if you choose to do distance learning, my advice would be don't just study the question banks, which are available out there. You will need to know the knowledge for future interviews and just for your flight career in general. Generally speaking, you will need to do the ATPL exams from the country where you are going to obtain your initial CPL license. UK and Ireland have a slight agreement where they will validate their own exams, but other than that, you will need to do the exams in the country where your license is being obtained. So after the ATPL theory, it's all flying from here. You have to do an instrument rating. Your instrument rating allows a pilot with a suitably qualified aircraft to fly non-VFR flights, i.e. in the clouds, without contact to the terrain, at night, etc. I would say this is probably the most difficult part of the practical training. I found IFR quite hard initially, figuring out how all the VORs work, the to, the from, all these things that now sound easy. At the start, they can get quite hard to understand. Generally, the courses are around 55 hours. A lot of it can be done in the simulator, around 40 hours, I believe. Don't quote me on the hour figures, please, because they may be wrong and they may well change from year to year, but it's around that. So 40 hours could be done in the simulator, and around 15 hours have to be done in a real aircraft, real flights. The course will teach you how to fly only using your instruments, how to fly various procedures, SIDS, stars, approaches, ILSs, only using your instruments. The most complex procedure, probably ILS, instrument landings. As well as being the hardest part of training, it's probably the most expensive as well, cost-wise for the aircraft. That and the multi-engine. So that brings me on to the multi-engine. A multi-engine rating allows a pilot to fly an aircraft with more than one engine. It can be done individually, or like I did it combined with an IR course. So I did a multi-engine IR course combined together. It requires something along the lines of 8 hours manual flight initially, VFR of the multi-engine to get your multi-engine rating, followed by a flight test. There are some requirements before you do your multi-engine piston rating, 70 hours pilot in command. So this goes back to the hour building that you've done previously. And that's about it, actually, I think. Again, quite an expensive part if you're paying for it on an hourly basis, because the multi-engine aircraft are expensive. So now you're getting towards the end. You have your PPL, your IR, your multi, you're doing your hours, you've got your ATPL, you can finally do your CPL, Commercial Pilot License exam. So what does a CPL license allow you to do? Essentially, it allows you to work as a pilot. It allows you to earn money as a pilot. You need to have 100 hours PIC before you start a CPL course. And a CPL course normally involves around 25 hours. You can combine the night rating with that, the 5 hours that we spoke about before. And the course is very similar to a PPL course. It just involves flying more accurately. Whereas before the altitude error might have been 100 feet, now you have 50 feet to play with. So you just have to fly more accurately. A greater emphasis is placed on emergencies and emergency procedures. After all, you are expected now to be flying people around, so you're expected to operate safely, efficiently, etc. So that's you. You have your commercial license. That's where I was 2.5 years ago now. It was a great feeling when I got my license through the post finally. So now what? Well, if you want to get into an airline, you need a type rating to fly the specific plane that they operate. In my case, a 737. So I needed to complete a type rating for that. Now, with most companies, you do your interview process before, which I'm going to talk about in other videos. You do your interview process, then you go on to your type rating. However, to qualify even for the interview process, you need what's called an MCC, Multi-Crew Corporation. This is the last qualification you will need before applying for an airline job. The course is all simulator and classroom, involves no flying. It usually lasts around a week to 10 days, and it focuses on CRM, cockpit communications, crew cooperation, and a big emphasis, if you do it with a good company, is also placed on operating procedures, SOPs, standard operating procedures. Most simulators used on MCC courses are based on the two big jets that you will probably jump onto first, so a 737 or an Airbus 320. But it will vary depending on the training organisation. Of course, you don't have to do it on a 737 or an Airbus 320. However, I would recommend, if you have the money, to pay for one of the courses that are slightly better in this particular scenario, to go ahead and do it. I do not regret paying almost twice as much for the MCC course I did in Ireland than I would have paid in Spain to do an MCC course on a Beechcraft 200 it was. That said, I know a guy who did that MCC course in Spain for half the price, and he works in the same company I do now. So it's not really a deal breaker, but for me, I learnt a lot during my MCC. And finally, if you get past your interview stage after this, you will go on to do a type rating. Now, a type rating is rather long, depending what company you do it on, and probably the hardest part of the training I have done. It involves classwork, it involves a lot of theory work on the aircraft you're doing, generally around between 6 weeks to 3 months of classwork, and you have to do technical exams, performance exams on the aircraft, you have to know all the systems, etc. And then you go on to simulator training. You do around 40 hours on the simulator for your aircraft. Some of them are fixed base. Then you go on to the full motion sims, which are fantastic. You have a lot of fun. It's a very, very steep learning curve. I'll tell you that right now, but it's really good fun. And then after your type rating, the company will move you on to line training, which is flying the aircraft with passengers or cargo, whichever company you're with, line training captains sitting next to you, slightly more experienced guys who know you're a novice, and you do line training for around 2 months until you get a line check and they say you are good to operate on your own now with everybody else. Type rating costs nowadays around £30,000 or 30,000 euros, depending what currency you're in. It's around the same nowadays. I paid 29,500 for a 737-800 type rating. Some companies will offer to pay it, but you have a bonded contract with them. It very much depends what company you end up in. So I went down the modular route. There are some benefits to the modular route. It's flexible. You don't necessarily have to do all the items I've spoken about in order, or even at the same school for that matter, although I would say it's beneficial to stay at the same school. A lot of people do the PPL in warmer countries, even go across to the States to do it. It involves a bit more paperwork, but you can get it done relatively quickly. After that, you can do your hour building in your own pace. Remember, you need 100 hours PIC to start your CPL and 70 to start your multi-engine rating. It also gives you plenty of freedom and time to study for your ATPL in your own time. You can do a lot of online tests and sit the exams when you feel that you're going to get a good mark on them. There's no pressure from a school pushing you through as quickly as they can. It can be quite slow doing the modular, especially depending on your school. My school wasn't the best and they were a little badly organised, so I did have some pauses between stages I may not have wanted. However, it worked out fine in the end. I was happy with it, and it was a lot cheaper. Let's take a quick breakdown of the modular route. You need to do your PPL, that's 45 hours, plus 10 hours solo probably, so you're going to end up with 55. 5 hours for the night rating, 8 hours on the multi, you're going to do around 60 hours hour building, PIC, solo time, 15 hours on the multi-engine instrument rating. Remember, the simulator time doesn't count as actual flight time, and you should end up with around 200 hours once you have your CPL, which is another 15 hours on top of that. You will need to do a bit more hour building to come up to the 200 hours once you've done your CPL like I did. If you do it at the minimum required PIC like I did, then I had to do another 15 to 20 hours, I can't remember exactly, to come up to 200 before I could apply for the license, even though I'd done all the tests and passed. Use these hours, take your family, take your friends up, enjoy the flying. It's probably one of the funnest times you'll have flying in your career, is these hours where you're doing hour building, especially if I was very lucky with the school I went to actually, where they allowed us, it was in Spain, and they allowed us to take the plane anywhere we wanted essentially. So I flew all over Spain to the coast, would take my girlfriend to have a paella on the beach. It was brilliant, really, really good fun. You also learn a lot and gain a lot of experience as you're flying solo. You deal with a lot of situations you haven't come across in training, and it really helps you grow as a pilot. Now, integrated route, that's a very different story. A school will take you as an integrated pilot from 0 to hero in the whole course duration. So they will take you from having no experience, do your PPL, and get you all the way to a frozen ATPL. That's your CPL with the frozen ATPL subjects, and they will do all that integrated within the school in a normally much shorter period of time. Some even offer MCC courses too. The big advantage of an integrated route is you are going to complete your training in the shortest possible time. If you haven't heard of the big schools, you have CTC, FT Jerez, these kind of schools. Oxford, these are the big ones. Big disadvantage, costs a lot of money, a lot. And I'm almost talking double what I paid for a modular route. I could go on about pros and cons for each all day. It's just depending on your situation, the schools that are around you, where you want to do your training. You have to think about how long it's going to take, what the weather is like where you're going to be flying. Will you be able to do all the hours? What is the school like? If you know people there already, ask them, how is the school organized? Are you flying a lot? All these kind of things. So it very much depends on the school and how they are organized. There is no definite answer I can give you as to whether to go down a modular or an integrated. It's up to you what suits your situation. For me, the cost of training was a huge factor, so I had to go modular. I couldn't afford the price tag for schools like CTC, FT Jerez, Oxford. So you may be asking yourself, how much does it cost, right? I'm in debt around £100,000. However, that does include my £30,000 type rating and living costs for the last 4 years or so included as well. I was lucky. I did my modular course in Madrid. It was relatively cheap, one of the cheapest I could find. At the end of the day, like I've mentioned, you get the same license at the end of the day. It's up to you how well you do on it, you know. You study hard for it, you get good results. Nobody else is going to take that away from you. If you're thinking going to CTC or Oxford is going to give you any more chances, I would say that's not true, in my experience. I would say the chances of getting a job afterwards are down to you. Saying that though, it is true that some of these schools, they do organise interviews with companies, so they do maybe have a lot more flow of people getting into airlines because it's easier to get the interview, possibly. I haven't looked at the websites recently, but CTC, FT Jerez, these kind of guys, they charge around 100 plus, maybe even 120 to do a integrated route in 1.5 to 2 years. So you have to think about what suits you best. In the last year to 2 years, European market, airlines have shown an unprecedented demand for pilots, so it's a very good time. A lot of airlines are expanding rapidly, not only in Europe, but in the Middle East and China, where a lot of guys go to. A lot of companies are getting a lot of aircraft delivered on a yearly basis. They all need to be crewed. And generally, from what I've seen, compared for even 5 years ago, where the market was almost stagnant and there were a lot of people struggling to get interviews and jobs, to now, where I personally have been to many interviews and there are many companies opening positions for cadets, guys with no experience. I hope you've enjoyed this video, guys. Go out, investigate your schools, and the best advice I can give you if you want to become a pilot: passion and discipline. Very important. One of my instructors told me that once, I'll never forget it. Passion and discipline. All the best, till next time.